Hello and welcome to this Aftermaths episode of the Primary Maths Podcast, the show where we talk all things primary maths. With me, John Cripwell.
And with me, Becky Brown.
Hello, Becky. How are you today?
Hello, I'm well, thank you, John. It's nice to see you. It's been a while. How are you?
It has been a while, yeah, it has. I think we were talking off camera earlier, Becky, just about how busy life and work is at this time of year, and reflective of what it's like in schools as well. At the moment, we know that the summer term is just always so busy, isn't it?
Yeah, we talked a little bit, didn't we, last episode about how busy term was, but I think we'd forgotten that it was going to get busy for us as well. And also as parents, I think, particularly if you've got children in multiple schools, this time of year, it can be really hard to keep up with everything that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my eldest has got a couple of school trips that she's going on. She's off to Harry Potter World again with her library club, which is definitely worth going to the library for this year in order to get a trip to Harry Potter World. Not that that's the only reason that she did it, but and a colour run and things. And then yesterday I had the pleasure of seeing my younger daughter, who's still at primary school, doing a Stone Age presentation. They'd had somebody in to do a Stone Age workshop with them in the day, and they were sort of showing off their knowledge. And brilliant to see them all dressed up in their, everybody dressed up in their Stone Age finery.
I love it.
How historically accurate all of it was. I'm not sure, but leopard print was a big thing a couple of million years ago, clearly, and it's still not gone away.
No, it's still around.
Yeah.
It's just, you can't get rid of it.
Those Stone Age people were on point with their fashion sense, clearly.
Trendsetters.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is busy, which is why a year ago we decided that this time of year would be the perfect time to launch a podcast. Can you believe we've nearly done a year, Becky, of the Primary Maths Podcast?
Yeah, when I was thinking about, we'll talk about Maths of Life a bit later, and it was on my Isle of Wight holiday, and I thought, I'm sure I talked about an Isle of Wight holiday at the very beginning,
Yeah.
and it's what I think I talked about in the very first Maths of Life. Can you believe it's been a whole year?
I know, time flies, doesn't it, when when you're having fun and talking maths. So yes, thank you for everybody that's joined us along the journey. I'm not sure it's quite a year, or maybe next week we'll talk about that a little bit more, celebrate our first birthday. But yeah, I've really enjoyed talking to you, Becky, and also to all of our wonderful guests. And we'll give some of those a shout out next week, I think. Meanwhile, today I thought we would start with, you thought they were over, but they're not quite. So in a couple of weeks' time, the SATs results will be released for this year. So there'll be a few nervous head teachers and year 6 teachers and potentially maths leads out there waiting for those to drop. I always used to, obviously I worked, as regular listeners will know, as assistant head teacher and year 6 teacher and maths lead in the last school that I worked in, and I was used to try and make a little bit of a thing of it on SATs results morning. I would I'd get everybody's orders, and I'd stop at McDonald's on the way into school and pick up either a celebratory or commiseratory breakfast for everybody, so that we could sit and have a look at them and at least be consoled or celebrate with a McMuffin or two and a hash brown. Everything's slightly better with a hash brown, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So I thought it might be interesting just to do a little bit of a recap, really, of what we learned from the papers this year, because I know you've looked through them, Becky, and I've had a look through them as well, just to see what we can glean from them. Obviously, they're historical now already, so just because something did or didn't come up this year doesn't mean that it will or won't come up again next year. But I think it is interesting to look at kind of what we can take from them over time, perhaps. So the first thing I thought we would have a quick look at is how much content there was from the year 6 curriculum across the 3 papers. And it was very similar to last year. So in terms of, we think about these as a year 6 test, but I know that we've talked in the past about, actually, we need to remember they're a key stage 2 test.
Yeah.
And actually this year, across the 3 papers combined, 43% of the content, roughly, depends on how you categorize some of this, but
Yeah.
roughly 43% of the content was taken from the Year 6 curriculum.
Okay.
Um, so, quick maths here, Becky, 57%, nearly two-thirds, was taken from the Year 3 to 5 curriculum. So again, it would be difficult to say that you could get the expected standard purely just using the Year 3 to 5 curriculum. But if you answered every single one of those questions right, we haven't seen the scale scores conversion tables yet, but we would guess that in most years you would actually be able to hit that expected standard just with the Year 3 to 5 curriculum. But in order to get anything above that, you do need some knowledge of the Year 6 curriculum, clearly. So yeah, so 43% roughly. Does that surprise you, Becky?
I think I've tracked this for over the last few years, John. I think it tends to stay fairly stable, doesn't it? We've talked a few times, haven't we, about the importance of seeing them as an end of key stage test and not an end of year 6 test. Easier said than done when you are the year 6 teacher, but really interesting actually to really break it down and see what content has come from different year groups and to know how important it is to get that right. Because if you, like you said, if you were really secure in those 3 year groups, you're actually well on your way to being at expected standard, even without that year 6 knowledge. So I think
Yeah.
it's good to be reminded of that.
I know you love being put on the spot,
No.
Becky. You love it.
Oh.
Can you guess what the top 3 domains were across the 3? I'll make it easier for you. Across the 3 papers. So obviously, for anybody listening who isn't familiar with the English national curriculum or the English end of Key Stage 2 tests, there's an arithmetic paper. There's and then 2 reasoning papers as well. We'll talk a little bit later about whether we think reasoning is the right term for those papers these days. But yeah, so we've got 3 papers there. One of them is arithmetic, so that should be a clue. What do you reckon the top 3 areas that were assessed in this year's papers were?
Does multiplication division come separately from addition and
No, so
subtraction? So
they're kind of bunched together under you could say calculation, I guess.
calculation. So I'm assuming calculation was up there.
Top. Yeah. So across the 3 papers, 35%. But interestingly, still, even in the reasoning papers, it was still the heaviest weighted domain. 19%, so about a fifth of the questions relied heavily on calculation. Again, it depends because some of these cross domains, don't if some of these
Yeah.
questions cross domains, so it depends exactly how you work it out. But for argument's sake, about 19% across the reasoning papers, 35% across the 3 papers together.
Okay. Fractions, decimals, and percentages must be up there.
Second, yeah, second, 24% of the full test, but only 13% of the reasoning papers. So again, second in both camps, but yeah, a distinct drop from the arithmetic to the reasoning papers.
Yeah. Oh, I'm torn on the last one.
It's a tricky one. I don't know if I'd have got the third one, but again, it's the same over the 2.
I was tempted to say place value.
And
Is it?
you should.
I'm going
You
to
should.
say it. Place
Yeah,
value.
you should. You should say number and place value, which is about 9% of the full test, but for the first time, more of that in the reasoning than in the arithmetic, unsurprisingly. So 13% of the reasoning papers, number and place value.
Okay.
And then following behind that, in fact, fractions, decimals, percentages, number and place value, and measurement were all about 13% of the reasoning papers. So equal weighting really across those 3 areas, which surprised me a little bit because I always think of fractions as being quite a heavy area for the SATs. And it was, but so were number and place value and measurement. And then statistics, ratio, shape, etc. A little bit less. And you can find that breakdown online in plenty of places, actually, if anybody's interested to go and have a look. Sad in some ways still to see shape down there, seemingly less valued than some of the other areas.
It's really sad, particularly as if you look at a lot of GCSE content or looking at my eldest is in year 10 now, so we've got mocks this week. So we've been looking at lots of GCSE papers. And there's so much shape and statistics,
Yeah.
actually. There's so much of it in there that you think that foundation knowledge that they're going to learn at primary is really, really important.
Yeah, and it's
But
hard, isn't it? Because you've got that tension between we've got this measurement at the end of Key Stage 2 that schools are judged on,
mm,
but we've also got this uh, duty to prepare our pupils for life beyond primary school, and part of that is covering the whole curriculum, isn't it? So
yeah,
just because something isn't covered particularly well in the SATs doesn't mean that we shouldn't be covering it. And so I hope it'd be nice to think at this time of year, post SATs, year 6 teachers, if you're not already drowning in rehearsals and plays and transition days and all the other sporting events and things that go on at this time of year. Be nice to think that there might be some space in there to do a little bit of shape
yeah,
work in this summer term, perhaps, because it is, yeah, when you get into it, it it's we've talked before, I think, on the podcast about how much I enjoy blowing children's and teaching students' minds, actually, when we talk about how to categorize shapes and the
yeah,
properties of shapes, and why a square is a rectangle and some rectangles are squares and all that sort of thing. It's a really nice thing to get into and have
yeah,
conversations about.
definitely. Hopefully, that's what's happening in year 6 classrooms, John. Although I suspect there's residential trips and all sorts going on.
Yeah.
I don't mind it.
We used to do our residentials. I don't know if we said this before. We used to do our residentials in the autumn term as a way to um,
Yeah,
get to know the class, which I think, yeah, was a benefit. In the previous school, we used it as kind of a carrot
mhm,
for the year sixes to say, if your behaviour is great and things, you get to go on the residential. But actually, I really saw the benefit of having it earlier in the year and building that kind of team spirit in the autumn term.
yeah.
The only downside was we used to go to Buxton and it
When
was often snowing, even just in November. But then same could be said about Buxton in June some years. So yeah, you're not guaranteed anything by going in the summer.
and yeah, I've
Um,
had rainy summer residentials that haven't been
yeah,
not a speck of sunshine in sight, but I've done both, and I feel the same. I think actually early in the year is better. Yeah, I think you get to see a side of your children when you go on residential
yeah,
that
absolutely.
you
Yeah,
see early in the year.
yeah. I remember going on some of the summer ones and thinking, oh, I wish I'd known that about X pupil
Yeah,
6 months ago, because that would have really helped me. Um, The other thing, of course, is when you do go on a rainy summer residential, you're not as prepared for it as you are if you go on a rainy winter residential. The clothes that you take for winter tend to be quite different from the ones in summer. Anyway, we digress, which is not like us at all.
no,
This is normally, if you've not listened before, this is normally a finely tuned, carefully honed 30 minutes of non-stop primary maths talk. We hardly ever go off on a tangent. So, Becky, I did pick out just a couple of interesting questions to talk about, particularly from the arithmetic paper, actually, because
right.
that's the one that we tend to think of as being most predictable, and we think about it as the most procedural as well. We can teach the pupils procedures and they can apply those and get a good score on the arithmetic paper. But there was a couple of questions that stood out to me that I thought, oh, depending that idea that the best mathematicians do the easiest maths again. These two questions in particular really stood out to me as you could either spend 10 minutes on these or you could answer them in 10 seconds, depending on how you thought about it rather than the procedure that you used.
Yeah,
So, question 30 on the arithmetic, which is nearly at the end of the paper, really, asked them to find, and it was interesting the way they worded this, actually. So they didn't say 97% times 400, which they have done in the past. They've said 97% of 400, which is perhaps a more familiar way of thinking about it. So 97% of 400. You could either go down the route of, okay, I know how to find percentages. I could find 1% and times it by 97, or I could find 50% and 10% and 5% and 1% and make a combination of them therein. Or if you recognize what's happening here, you could think, well, I know that 97% of 100 is 97, and so 97% of 400 is just going to be 4 lots of 97. Or you could think, well, I know that the inverse, 3% of 100 is 3, so actually I could just do 3 times 4 to get 12 and take that away from 400, and I've got an answer really easily there. So that flexibility in thought is really important, isn't it? And I just saw that question and I thought, oh, I can imagine myself walking around the exam hall. We used to do it in the hall or a classroom, and looking at, some children would have got that without writing anything down, and others would be studiously working out their way through that. And it'd just be really nice to think that we're giving pupils that flexibility to think in different ways, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a perfect question, isn't it? I mean, you've just talked about it for a little bit of time. If you took that in front of a classroom and talked about it, you can get loads out of what is essentially a very quite quick arithmetic question. But having that discussion around what strategies and what approaches is the really important bit that is harder to make, maybe harder to assess, I guess, until you get to a time test and then you want to do the most efficient. But it's so interesting the difference that it can make. You know, yes, children who may have learned very procedurally to do 10% and 50% and add them all together, they need the confidence to come away from that, don't they? When that's not the
Yeah.
most efficient, and it just comes down to that understanding of what you're being asked, I guess.
A potentially even easier question was number 26, which was 3/4 divided by 3. And again, if you see that procedurally, then you could follow the procedure through and get an answer. But if you understand what 3/4 actually is as a concept, and what dividing by 3, sharing it into 3 means, then there's no calculation to do there, really. We're just doing 3 divided by 3, and that's very, very straightforward, isn't it? For question number 26. These are only worth 1 mark, but still, for question number 26 on the SATs paper, I thought that was a bit of a gimme. Again, if you have that conceptual understanding of what it means. And so it's just really important that we're showing pupils what it means as well as how to do it. And I know that's been a conversation that's been going on for a long while now, but I think sometimes, particularly in year 6, it's just really tempting just to give them a procedure and say, do it this way, and you'll get an answer. And they will get an answer. But again, I think it's that frustrating thing where the most able or the highest attaining year 6 pupils will see that and do it and save themselves loads of time.
Yeah,
And the pupils who are less confident won't see it, and therefore spend longer on it and more cognitive load, and make the rest of the paper harder as well. So,
that's it, isn't it? It's the impact
yeah,
of paper as well.
yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky. But yeah, so those were kind of my takeaways really from the arithmetic paper. I thought it was overall quite a fair paper. Paper 2, the first reasoning paper, seems to have been the one that most teachers felt was the harder of the 2, or of the 3 papers, really. Only 23 questions in it this year, which again is fewer than it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago. There's been a bit of a tendency over the last couple of years to have fewer questions in there. There was an early multi-step problem in there. Question 4 was a multi-step problem, relatively straightforward one about adding and subtracting, but still. And an early word problem as well in question number 5. So yeah, the sort of demand ramped up quite quickly, I think, in that paper. And 48% of that, give or take, was year 6 content, that paper. Again, I don't know why they give that for the second paper. Feels like a bit of a confidence killer. Maybe they think pupils will be more tired by the final one. But the final one, that's the only paper they've got to do that day. It seems unfair that on this day they've got the hardest of the 2 reasoning papers and the arithmetic paper to do. That feels, yeah, unnecessarily hard for me.
Yeah, that's it. Is it's unnecessarily hard. Why, when you plan these things, why not make it? It's already tough. They already have to sit the test. Why don't we make it as easy as possible?
Yeah. So again, in that paper, well, 28% of it was year 5 content, 48% was year 6 content. So, you're looking at about 75% of the paper really was upper key stage 2 content, and only 24% was lower key stage 2, 4% from year 3, one question I think from year 3. Whereas paper 3, still 26% year 5, 41% year 6, but 11% from the year 3 curriculum and 22% from the year 4 curriculum. So it felt more accessible. And again, I think it would be an easy thing just to swap those two around and,
Yeah.
have the easier, more accessible paper on the first day of the maths when they've already done the arithmetic.
Yeah, and
Um,
we know we talk about it all the time, don't we? The effect that confidence and anxiety
yeah,
can have on your ability. So if you've done a really difficult paper two and you know you've got another paper three, that could really have a negative impact on your mindset, couldn't it, going into that third paper, which
definitely.
you
Yeah.
could avoid if you switch them around.
Definitely, but something to be aware of, I think, for teachers for next year as well. That we can't say that next year paper two will be the harder paper again. We don't know, but just because paper two was hard doesn't necessarily mean that paper three is going to be hard as well. So some reassurances perhaps could be given there. I don't know. So yeah, so that those were my sort of thoughts on the SATs papers this year. It'd be interesting. Anybody listening who wants to get in touch, let us know what you think. Anything that you noticed. Favorite question from the SATs paper this year. They've got a bit of a thing about boxers. There was a couple of questions about boxers again this year, and there was last year as well. No Chen this year, Becky.
Oh, I
He
didn't
or she, because they, yeah. Seemed to make a comeback a couple of years ago, but
know.
no Chen this year, sadly.
Oh,
I
maybe
know.
gone to secondary school.
Bring back Chen.
Yeah.
I believe, Becky, you've got a Maths of Life for us next.
I have. Yeah, it seems like a long time ago now, John, but we've had a couple of weeks where we haven't had an episode to record. So I will just think back to that lovely time a couple of weeks ago when I spent the week on the beach in the Isle of Wight. And as predicted by us on the podcast, there was wonderful weather. We were talking about that chance of rain, weren't we? There was 0%, and it was very nice. But one of the things this time that struck us, we spent a lot of time outside, and was thinking about leveling the playing field when you're playing games, particularly also this time of year. It's the perfect time, isn't it? The sun is shining, go and play a little sneaky game of rounders, or to go outside as much as possible. Sports days are coming up. So thinking about how actually there is loads of opportunities for maths in PE lessons, lots of just incidental maths that, you don't have to even call it maths, but it can happen. We were playing rounders on the beach. We had a family of 5 and a family of 4. So for us, we adapted it by having a different number of bats each. So the family of 4 had 5 each, and the family of 5 had 4. So we had 20. Of course, it's not perfect leveling because it didn't affect the fact that one team had more fielders than the other. But it was just a way of using maths just a little bit to try to balance out the fairness. And this sort of came up because so we had this sort of conversation. Obviously, I'm often looking out for things for Maths of Life and encouraging my family to get involved. To get involved, they love it. But we came across it again when we played mini golf. So of course, that time there's no teams. It's just all for yourself, isn't it? Teams of one. But when you go to mini golf, the level of skill you're taking could be quite different. And lots of mini golfs do have a par for each hole, which is helpful. However, if you're playing adult and children, and my children are practically adults now, so I wouldn't let them play as children anyway. But if you were, it might have been better to maybe have a child par score, an adult par score, because nobody really wants those falling outs on the
No.
miniature golf course, which I'm sure everybody is familiar with. People getting frustrated or too competitive. But that, of course, then we start thinking about negative numbers if you're going below par and so. So just feel like there's lots of opportunities for maths in sport. And I think probably in the coming weeks, John, we can maybe even get some football chat in as it's the World Cup.
Well, yes, yeah.
Yeah. Maths
As
and
we
football.
record this, England are on course to bring it home.
Yes.
I mean, they won't. I'm calling that now at this point, but I'd be delighted if they do.
Yeah.
I guess in grown-up golf, if you want to call it that, not mini golf, full-size golf, they do have a handicap system, don't they, where that helps to level the playing field a little bit between different golfers of different experience and ability. So it's definitely something to think about and bear in mind.
And it feels
Um,
like most ways that you would level the playing field probably do involve some form of maths,
yes, yeah,
whether it's obvious or not.
yeah, nice,
Yeah.
lovely. Right, we will finish just with a little bit of research that was published this week. So it was published in a journal, which doesn't narrow it down hugely, does it? It was published in, Becky, the Journal of Interdisciplinary Studies in Education, JICE for short. And it's called, the study was called Collaborative Learning Interventions for Elementary Students' Mathematical Creative Reasoning and Meta-Analysis, which is a catchy title, isn't it? Yeah. So it was a meta-analysis, which means that they have looked at lots of different pieces of research and sort of tried to find commonalities in the findings between all of those. So this particular meta-analysis looked at 30 studies from around the world, looking at elementary/primary aged pupils, and interventions that had a positive effect on developing their mathematical creative reasoning, which I thought was an interesting thing to look at. So the paper used the idea of reasoning in a very particular way. It looked at novelty, so how pupils generate or adapt strategies rather than simply copying a method. So it was a novel problem that they've come across, not something they've necessarily seen before, in terms of routine and non-routine problem solving. Plausibility, whether they can justify why their approach makes sense. And mathematical anchoring was the third thing that they looked at in terms of reasoning. So is their reasoning grounded in mathematical properties rather than just in guesswork?
Okay.
So this was really about pupils being able to tackle unfamiliar mathematical problems, explain their thinking, compare approaches, and make sensible choices about strategy. It involved over 3,000 pupils across 11 countries from 1997 to 2024. And these pupils were in upper elementary grades, basically equivalent to between about years 4 and year 6. The big finding from it, Becky, that I thought was interesting was that collaborative learning had, in research terms, a very large positive effect on pupils' mathematical creative reasoning. Slightly technical, I don't pretend to understand all of this, but the overall effect size was Hedges G equals 1.58, which is very large, I'm led to believe. So it was the strongest effects were not just from pupils working in groups, you won't be surprised to know. It was the approach that the teacher took to setting up the task and designing the task that was most impactful. The most powerful approaches involved, you'll be shocked at this, Becky, open-ended and multiple solution tasks. This had the largest effect, around 1.74. And those were tasks where pupils solved the problems in more than one way, compared methods, thought flexibly about it, didn't just follow a procedure. And the second most impactful way of learning or developing mathematical creative thinking was around problem-based learning. So this was also very strong, about 1.71, and these tasks gave pupils a meaningful problem where the route was not immediately obvious, so that kind of non-routine problem-solving task. But the key was that they were given these things but were allowed to discuss them and work collaboratively together. And the progress that was made wasn't necessarily the same across all groups of pupils, but all groups of pupils made progress, which I thought was interesting. The final takeaway was that the length of the intervention, so these were given as interventions in those upper Key Stage 2 year groups. Interventions lasting more than 8 weeks were not significantly more effective. So there seems to be a bit of a limit to how long you can continue to run these interventions for before they lose their efficacy. And so the paper suggested that this was about the quality and the structure of the collaborative work rather than the amount of time spent doing it. So the high quality collaborative work, high quality problem solving, open-ended tasks, but not just download something and give it to them to have a go at, really thinking about what do
Yeah.
we want them to notice while they're doing this? What support and scaffold can we put in place to help them access it? And how long should we run this for? Yeah, I just thought it was a really interesting thing, not hugely surprising necessarily, but always nice to read something that sort of aligns with perhaps our approach
Yeah.
already.
Is really nice actually, particularly as this is an area which is really hard to assess. I think I've been doing a little bit of reading on problem-based learning actually, and how important the instruction is in that area, and how the educator decides when and how to intervene is really, really key. And some of the biggest things around all of this sort of problem-based learning and any research in this area is how is it assessed? So studies like this that show that there's an impact, I think, are really important.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So again, the key takeaways really, um, opportunities for collaboration. So pupils are sharing their thinking, talking aloud, all that oracy, all that justification, conjecture, reasoning. So many opportunities for that to happen within this group work. I think in some cases, consideration had been given to how those groups were structured as well, so that you know lots of things, as we know as teachers, that you have to take into account in these things, but making sure that the gap between attainment wasn't so large that one pupil ended up doing all the work and others in the group just went along for the ride. Um, and then the quality of the tasks as well, and how they were non-routine. They were not something that we've not just done a unit on multiplication and then they were given a question on multiplication. They really had to think through how to attempt these problems and find a way through them. And I suppose that led to the discussions, because if we give a routine problem, the answer is, or the way to get to the answer is relatively straightforward, and therefore some pupils will just sit and work on it and do it, and,
Yeah.
and others, you've lost that opportunity in some ways, haven't you, for discussion and collaboration. But yeah, do go and have a look at that if you're interested in that, or think about how it might impact your own practice in the classroom. I think that's about all we have time for this week, Becky.
Oh, well, it was lovely to catch up and get back in the podcast seat, John.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will be back next Friday with another podcast episode. No interview this Monday, but I have got some really exciting interviews lined up over the next couple of weeks. So look out for those. We'll let you know when they go live. In the meantime, if you wouldn't mind leaving us a quick rating or review, we would be absolutely delighted.
Yeah, please do. Or if you've got any comments on anything we've discussed today, you can reach out to us at primarymathspodcast@twinkle.co.uk.
Fantastic. Thanks, Becky. We'll see you next week.
See you next time.